Hello, lovelies. You may have heard the news being passed around that Sweden has decided to ban OnlyFans. It's not exactly true, but it's not exactly false either. Now, I'm hardly unbiased on this issue, but hear me out, then get all those Kuma and Guna cracks out of your system, right? I work with ex and current sex and adult entertainment workers every week. Sadly, not as a boner donor. The market for middle-aged catweasel porn is too niche, even for the internet. But my connection to adult performers may, and in fact probably does, bias me. Mind you, I've been anti-censorship since I was alive enough to have any sort of opinion on the topic, so maybe not. But still, ethically, you should know that I have biases. But let's get into it. Normally, I am a huge fan and booster of Northern European countries. They seem to have gotten a lot of stuff worked out that other countries struggle with. A criminal justice system that actually reforms people and has the lowest recidivism of any system in the world. Strong local social democracies. High taxation, yeah, but you get a lot from it. High standards of living, high standards of happiness. Yeah, basically, if you look at the Human Development Index scores, the top is pretty much dominated by Northern Europe. However, there is one arena in which the Nordics, I think, have gone off the rails, in my not so humble opinion, and that has been in their attitude to sex work. The Nordic model is what it's called, because that's where it comes from, and it has spread insidiously throughout many other Western nations in recent years by its ability to appeal both to conservative prudishness and more liberal progressiveness, but very much in inverted commas. What is it, though? And lots of people have heard of it, but don't necessarily understand exactly what it is. The Nordic model is an approach that can have various different avenues in which it's applied, but at its most basic level, it's an approach to policing and controlling prostitution. Not pornography, but we'll get to that. By supporting sex workers somehow, by making their lives a living hell and their work virtually impossible. How that's helping them, I'm not exactly sure. I'd describe it as infantilizing and paternalistic, but since it has emerged from the worst excesses of respectable feminism, it's more accurate to describe it as maternalistic. This isn't women helping women, it's women condemning women and making their lives harder while pretending to be helping them. So this brainchild of Sweden has been exported like IKEA furniture, just with a hell of a lot less screwing going on. It works like this. If you're selling sex, that is technically fine and legal. If you're buying sex, that's a crime. Because clearly if you arrest the customers, the whole industry will just magically collapse and vanish in a puff of progressive logic, right? Just like how arresting drug users has completely ended the narcotic industry worldwide. Oh, wait. The idea behind it is that all sex work, all adult work now, they seem to be saying, is inherently coercive. That nobody really wants to do it, and that by criminalizing the demand, you can rescue people from it. The kind of rescue that leaves you broke, isolated, without a career, terrified to screen your next client if you go back to your career in case he's a cop. We all sell our labor and our bodies and our minds. Capitalism is coercive, work or starve. So one way or another, we all do the same thing. What they fail to explain here is why shagging should be treated any differently to dancing, sport, mining coal, sitting in a cubicle, wasting the prime years of your life making data entries, or scrubbing mineralized piss out of urinal troughs. Right? We all sell our labor and our bodies. Why is this any different? I don't know. Countries like Norway, France, Ireland, and Canada have all dabbled in this and seem enamored of it as an idea. Ban the Johns, not the job sort of strategy. And while it kind of looks good on paper and you can kind of see where they're coming from, like a lot of utopian fantasies, it tends to fall apart in practice where it rubs up against reality. Because, surprise, if you make something harder and riskier for the people paying, it doesn't make it any safer for the ones doing the work. It pushes the whole trade further underground, so there's less safety, fewer legal protections because it's taking place out of sight, and a lot more time spent playing guess who with your client's real intentions if you are someone who has to work in this arena or wants to work in this arena. It also tends to lead to more exploitation, not less, and more playing footsie with grey and black market organisations who can be more exploitative. After all, they take care of and absorb the more difficult parts and some of the risk, but in exchange, what do they want? But don't worry, once they've rescued you, the government will offer you some underfunded exit programs into jobs that don't exist, maybe a sympathetic nod, while the bank closes your account for suspicious activity or immoral earnings. It's prohibition with a polite face, a moral crusade dressed up as progressivism. Same old song, slightly different lyrics. It's proof that you can weaponize compassion just as easily as cruelty or judgment. So far, so much prostitution. And many people are going to draw a hard line between prostitution and pornography, between sex work and adult work. It's not a hard line that really exists in reality, but a lot of people will make that distinction and division. But Sweden's latest move in its ongoing crusade against sex work is now set to come into force. Starting on July the 1st this year, paying for live streamed sex acts online, think custom cam shows or bespoke OnlyFans content, will become a criminal offence in Sweden, punishable by up to a year in prison. Now, this doesn't constitute a ban on OnlyFans, but I think you can start to see the problem there. It technically only applies to live streamed or custom pre-recorded content. So if you go to an adult worker and you say, I would like a short video of you spanking your ass with a copy of my novel, for example, just off the top of my head, then that could land you in prison. Which, doesn't that strike you as inherently ridiculous? So, if you are an OnlyFans creator, you can still post your nudes and your horny videos, you just can't do anything bespoke. How they're going to know or police that, I don't know, but it's still a problem. So you can still post stuff, people are still allowed to buy it, but you can't undertake commissions. To reiterate very plainly and without all my verbiage, this law doesn't affect pre-recorded adult content, but targets real-time interactive performances and custom-created content. So this expansion is a digital extension of the Nordic model and based around expanding that interpretation and understanding of sex work into broader adult work more generally. Essentially what they're doing is reclassifying custom pornography and live shows for tips as sex acts in exchange for money. So they're reclassifying that part of pornography as prostitution, even though nobody is actually touching each other or having sex. Which again makes it all seem ridiculous to me, but here we are. No word yet on how this might affect strippers or people who go to strip clubs, since technically, I guess, tucking a bill into a garter could be seen as paying for sexual services now. The idea is to reduce demand and, by extension, exploitation of women. They don't care about the men in sex work, by and large. However, critics argue that it pushes the industry underground, making it more dangerous for sex workers. There's also the issue that the adult entertainment landscape today is not the drug-fueled exploitation mine of the 1980s, which seems to be the paradigm under which do-gooders on both sides of the political aisle seem to be operating. Modern adult work is primarily creator-owned, with much less intermediary interference or potential for exploitation than there once was. So this new law has sparked debate, certainly, first in Sweden, now around the world elsewhere. Some politicians advocate for even stricter measures, believe it or not, including banning platforms that host this kind of thing, like OnlyFans altogether, and yet again age-gating the internet, which doesn't sound like a bad idea until you understand that they want you to provide your photo ID in order to access adult sites, which connects you with what you like, allegedly in order to protect children. But do you really want your bank or government knowing exactly what it is that you fap to? Especially if they might then criminalize something that you fap to, like BDSM, because that's happened a few places. And lest we forget, people have already been arrested or placed under suspicion for liking the work of adult actresses who maybe look a little bit young. Look up the Little Lupe arrest case. Just don't do it on a work computer. Hysteria is everywhere, and it gets absurd. But this isn't just about Sweden. You might think, who cares if the Swedes do this? It's not going to affect the rest of us. Well, there's moves in the US, people who want to criminalize all pornography there, and they'll be looking at this and how they can use it to pass off their ideas as more progressive than they are. The Nordic model has been adopted to various degrees in various forms by countries like Norway, Iceland, even parts of Canada. Here in the UK, it's popular amongst a certain set, a certain very influential set within the Labour Party as well. So far, we have rebuked the worst of the online safety bills that have been presented towards us, but sooner or later, one government or another will get some form of this through. Their motivations are just slightly different, but the end result is the same. The Nordic model is often touted as progressive to try and get it past liberals and the left. But many sex worker advocacy groups argue that it strips workers of their agency and makes their lives, financially and otherwise, a lot more precarious. My friend Laura Lee was a strong sex work advocate before she passed, and if you ever wanted to tease a rant out of her, which was always entertaining, merely mentioning the Nordic model was a good way to get one out of her. I miss her. But it's not just laws that get involved here. Financial discrimination is a massive issue. Adult workers often find their bank accounts frozen or closed without explanation. They pay premiums on every transaction that they make. In the UK, there's been a significant increase in complaints about this practice, which has become known as debanking. But the well has been somewhat poisoned because most of the most ardent and strident voices against debanking are people on the far right, which makes it a lot harder to argue against the practice politically, because it seems like you're backing up the likes of Farage or the BNP. The Financial Conduct Authority has warned banks against denying accounts to sex workers, noting that lack of access to financial services can cause significant harm. But it still goes on, and a lot of adult work is international, which further complicates matters. The idea behind extending the Nordic model into adult work from sex work is to criminalise purchase and exploitation. But if interpreted in the way it does seem to be written, this law would mean that payment services could be fined or have people arrested for taking a portion of the proceeds. Website hosts similarly, cam hosting and content hosting sites as well. So if this spreads far enough, there will be no way to do this work for money, even though technically it's not illegal. No way to get paid, nowhere to host it. So what do? Platforms like OnlyFans aren't immune to these issues, despite their profitability and their size. OnlyFans struggles, for example, to find buyers for the company due to its adult content. Major investors shy away, and the platform operates outside app stores to avoid revenue sharing with Apple and Google. The owner, Leonid Radvinsky, has earned over $1 billion in dividends alone since 2021. But the platform's adult nature limits its appeal to mainstream investors. I mean, don't you kind of miss greedy, amoral capitalism? At least you kind of knew where you stood, and it didn't care if something was moral or not. It just did it because there was money in it. Sometimes you miss that, even as a hoary old socialist. But the adult industry is changing, has changed. Platforms like Fancentro, OnlyFans, and so on have allowed creators to take control of their own content and income. They're no longer reliant on exploitative studios or middlemen unless they go into it eyes open and with a backup plan. This shift has empowered many, offering them a viable income stream that they would not otherwise have access to, making them economically active in a way that they otherwise wouldn't be. Yeah, and especially during tough economic times like we're in right now, giving people more options for work and to take care of themselves is better, isn't it? And it's often the only way that marginalised people have to support themselves. Trans people in particular are heavily overrepresented in sex work. So while laws like Sweden's aim to protect, they often end up harming the very people that they're meant to help. It's crucial to listen to sex workers here and to consider approaches that prioritise their safety, their financial security, and their autonomy. And ultimately, it is none of our business who is fucking who, why, whether they're paying for it or not. It doesn't do any harm, ultimately. Especially once you get rid of the pimps and the exploitation, which has happened not through government repression, but through the democratization of the ability to share content online. And don't think this won't affect you. Maybe you never masturbate. Doesn't matter. Because what happens first to the adult industry comes sooner or later for the rest of us in the end. Versions of the online harms or the online safety bill here in the UK have not just cited adult content or violent content or terrorist content. They've strayed into talking about esoteric content or politically charged content, things like that. The adult industry, as ever, is a canary in the coal mine for our freedoms elsewhere. So you fight now, not when it gets to you. Zang. If you love my barely prepared content here, then you'll love my completely unprepared content on my streaming channel, which is youtube.com/grimstreams, which is pretty easy to remember.